it's so good to see so many of you here for this session, all about innovation and growth, but predominantly collaborating across markets in order to build and grow in a really exciting and sustainable way. And Filippo has some extraordinary insights and a very prolific background, which I'm sure we will all learn from and gain some brilliant insights from over the course of the next 30 minutes. So, let me just start by giving you a formal introduction. Filippo is currently working for MIPIM, but I'm going to get to that in a second, but that should prick up your ears. He has had an absolutely illustrious career with companies like Procter & Gamble, with Bain, with G Real Estate, and you joined what was Reed Midham back in 2010, and you joined as the director of MIPIM and MIPIM Asia. He then became the director of Reed Midham's real estate division in 2014 and was in charge of supervising all of MIPIM and MAPIC markets. And then when Reed, as you probably know, became RX, Filippo was put in charge of all of those RX activities in France and Italy, which includes 30 mega events across 15 industries, including, of course, the amazing MIPIM for real estate. So, bringing a wealth of international experience, I guess I should start by saying benvenuto or bienvenue, or maybe even marhaba, because we are in Riyadh, and that is one of the only Arabic words that I have so far learnt, so I'm determined to use it as much as I can. But it's great to have you with us, and I'm really excited about this conversation all around collaboration. So catalyzing growth, thinking about innovation, thinking about this strategic collaboration between markets. This is something that Filippo's had to do extensively across his career, and I think that we are all thinking about how we do in this territory and across borders as well. But let me just start by finding out who here has attended one of the MIPIM events. Can I see a big show of hands? Who has been to MIPIM in Cannes, in the south of France? A couple of people, 3 or 4. David, I would expect your hand to go up. If it didn't, I'd be worried. Fantastic. And what about MIPIM Asia? Has anybody been to the Asian edition of MIPIM? Is that in Hong Kong, Filippo?
It's in Hong Kong, exactly.
In Hong Kong, yeah. Okay, so maybe for those who don't know about this absolute juggernaut of an event that is MIPIM and MIPIM Asia, would you like just to share with the audience what it is, try and give us a flavor of this powerhouse real estate event?
Well, MIPIM started 30 years ago. It was at a very peculiar moment in Europe, just after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when Europe was opening up and the transactions were actually becoming more cross-border. And MIPIM was started in 1990 in Cannes with exactly that idea. Of course, I was not there, but the founders, this was the idea was to create bonds and creating relationships across countries. At that time was mostly countries in Europe, and mostly France, the UK, and Germany. And then it started to grow very fast, because there was nothing like that at the time, and there is still nothing like that today. And then now it's a truly global event. And the peculiarity of MIPIM that gathers around 25,000 decision makers in real estate, city planning, architects, engineers, investors, and so on, is that on the one hand you have decision makers only that are there, and on the other hand is that it's a truly global event where no country is taking the first seat. You have multiple countries, everybody is there, welcome at the same level. So it's basically, for almost a week, Cannes become a MIPIM land, and you're not in France anymore. In a sense, you're really at MIPIM, and that helps new countries that want to be on the radar screen of international investors or international community, to be there like everybody else. You're not like, there is not a host country. The host is MIPIM, and we are often compared to Davos in that sense for real estate, and that's a little bit the concept, and that's the success is mostly explained by that.
So collaboration absolutely is at the heart of your ethos, of your brand, of the event that you put on. Because I think sometimes when we talk about catalyzing growth, we talk about innovation, we think about technological solutions, we think about the concrete, the tangible, and we forget sometimes that a lot of it is about the ethos, the heart, the purpose with which something is put together. So can you just talk to us a little bit about that ethos? What's right at that heart of collaboration across MIPIM?
Well, you have, as you mentioned before, we have, as RX, we organize 400 events globally. Some of them are really mega events, similar to MIPIM for other industries. What is striking about MIPIM, what is striking about real estate is that you really have two components there. You have the product, like in any other event, but then you have an additional layer, which is the human layer. And we know that real estate is and I come from the industry, I've been doing that for a while before joining MIPIM. It's a combination of hard assets, combination of financing capabilities, but it's also a combination of trust, relationships, the will of working together, knowing each other better, and that's much more than in non-transactional industries. So the transactional industries like real estate, which is probably the master of all transactional industries, they have a very strong human component. So this is why an event like MIPIM is really built around two pillars. On the one hand, you have the products, you have the projects, you have the stands, you have the conferences, you have the content, and on the other hand, you have all the soft part, which happens during the show, which happens at dinner, which happens at lunch, and this part is as important, it's not a secondary part, it's as important as the hard part.
Yeah, and sometimes I think we don't necessarily think about private versus public collaboration. I think especially like you say in this industry, yes, it's people, it's great to network, but I think sometimes we don't always immediately see the potential in building those relationships sort of across our sector, across the silos, across the specific parts of the industry that we happen to sit within. So can you tell us about the beautiful thing that comes together when private and public collaboration occurs?
Well, today is absolutely necessary because, and we said that, we see that in Cannes, you basically, you zoom in, before you arrive to the asset or you arrive to the project, you need to have an opinion about the city, the region, or the country. And the best opinion you can have is when you have, you basically check all the key components of having you invested long-term in a certain territory. So you want to understand better about the rule of law, you want to understand better about the economical context, about the political system. You want to understand better, does the country have a vision? Does the country have a long-term plan? Because we know, and this is another peculiarity of real estate events and the real estate industry, you know that when you invest, you're there in the long term. You're there for the long term. So you cannot just promote your asset there. You cannot just promote your project. Before doing that, you need to work hard to promote your country, your area. And we can, so that's the first thing. And the second thing that the public can bring is again, the long-term view, because, and the vision for a territory and the vision for the city. So the contextual and the long-term view is absolutely necessary, and it's complementary to the asset and the real estate component.
I think sometimes it's really difficult, especially in current times and in changing market conditions and with the economic factors at play and also some of the uncertainty we've lived through, to have a long-term view. And I imagine that you have that internally for the organization, which then transcends and is something that you encourage your attendees to take on. But from the organizing perspective, I mean, you've been there for, what, 14 years or so? How have you taken this long-term view and navigated and managed these uncertain times, like, for example, coming back from COVID? I mean, that must have really rocked your plans and your principles.
Well, that was a hard time, I think, for all the industries that welcome people, so hotel, restaurants, and so on. But if the event industry was severely hit during the COVID. That's no surprise. We almost didn't have any revenues for a year and a half. And we could actually measure the strengths of some of our events. We tested a lot of things during that period. We had plenty of time to work on new initiatives. One of the things we tested was the digital side. Actually, when the pandemic hit, there was a lot of talk about, okay, maybe mega events are done, are gone forever. And I'm not talking just about B2B, I'm talking about B2C as well. It means soccer matches, it means concerts, and then, of course, conventions like this or MIPIM or others. So there was a lot of buzz around that. Yeah. Is it basically, have we entered into a fully digital era where physical events or face-to-face events are gone? And so we tried a lot of digital platforms to find proxies of physical events, and they worked quite well during the pandemic. And then we were like holding our breath to see, okay, which way the market will go when basically in the second half of 2021, some of the sanitary restrictions were released and we could open again events. And we could see with, not with a lot of surprise, because we had some soft signs about that, but that the market absolutely made the choice to go back to physical events. And the digital platforms are now complementary to the physical events. They facilitate the physical event. They help preparing the face-to-face meetings. They help identify the good targets and so on, but they didn't substitute to physical events. So this is something we basically found out the hard way. It's like a crash test for physical events. And today, actually, face-to-face events are stronger than before because they went through this crash test. And there are no doubts today that face-to-face events are there to stay at least for a while. While actually, there were a lot of doubts before the pandemic. So that's a paradox of the pandemic. Yeah. And this is something that we really tested out during this period. And I can't hide that we are pretty happy that the market and our clients prefer the face-to-face to the digital one. Yeah.
I mean, I think we're all testament in this room here today and in this exhibition area that there is value in the coming together, in the developing human connections, in finding those relationships and those networks for collaborative purposes. I mean, a show of hands, you know, you've chosen to be here today, but do you see the value in being here in person rather than behind a screen? Yes. I mean, I don't think you'd be here if you didn't see that this was definitely a valuable experience and part of those intangibles that I think Filippo is sharing with us today. So coming to this topic again of growth and catalyzing growth and innovation, but through this idea of cross-market collaboration. Obviously, your event is, in a sense, borderless. It has a location, but like you've said, it's not a France event. It's not hosted by a particular country. How do you find those collaborations? How do you know who to partner with? How do you create that as, you know, the very heart of what it is that you're putting on for your attendees?
Well, we have a central team that is based in Paris. But we have international presence through either through our group, RX, so we're present in more than 30 countries. So we have employees working on our French events in most of the countries. We actually have a network of partners like David here covering the Middle East, so that constantly look for what's going on. Look for new partners, new clients, new customers, and then we have a central team that decides. It's like making a once a year an edition of a newspaper. I always say. So basically, you need to editorialize. Yeah. And we have a group of experts working with us, working for us as employees that come from the real estate sector. So the current director of MIPIM that took my place comes through Unibail Rodamco Westfield, so he's one of the top players in the commercial real estate. So they know what they're talking about. They have their own network and connections, and we create this basically yearly edition. MIPIM is actually, we are already working, the team is already working for 2025. Of course, the priority is now to deliver 2024 in March, but the team is already thinking about the theme, the innovations for 2025. The other thing that helps us a lot in identifying new trends are the awards. Yeah. So we have this large selection of the best real estate projects that have been completed in the previous year. And the number is around 200, 250 every year that are submitted. These are like the top projects globally. And this helps us a lot in refreshing constantly the offer, because not only because of the project, but also because we sometimes discover new companies, new partners, new architectural firms, new developers that submit. And then we, of course, we are in contact with them, and we want to understand more about their project, what they do, and how can they eventually come to MIPIM to promote them.
I think that's all part of the inspiration that happens when we come together and we share best practice and we share some of these projects. And I hope you have plenty of submissions from this part of the world.
Yeah, we do.
And maybe encourage some more. Maybe that's one of your calls to action from this session, is to think about any projects you'd like to submit to the MIPIM Awards, because they are very prestigious. But speaking to the audience, Filippo, we're obviously made up here today of people across all parts of the real estate industry. Are there any areas of intertwining, any areas of collaboration which maybe aren't immediately obvious, that from your wealth of experience you see as being key areas of focus, where people could be thinking, oh, maybe I could create relationships with this sector or these types of roles that perhaps we're not already doing as much as we could be?
Well, there are two areas, I would say, thinking aloud, that are going to be key to make relationships and to find new partners in events like MIPIM. One is today the big debate, and I was actually at the awards jury meeting just last week in Paris. And there was a lot of debate about how to select the different projects to basically select the finalists, and then the winners that will be, by the way, selected by MIPIM delegates during the show. But the key topic was how to create communities around real estate. And this is something that I was thinking about the mega and the giga projects here. There is a lot of thinking here that can actually be very useful for projects in other parts of the world, especially the legacy projects that were not conceived with that idea in mind. And today, the new projects, they all focus, they all have a part during the thinking and during the planning part on how to build a community around the real estate assets. Yeah. It's not just a series of assets scattered around a regional area. And this was not the case for legacy projects that were conceived and built decades ago. So I think about some of the European countries, for instance. So this is something where there is a lot of debate and a lot of opportunity for partnering. And the second one is on the technology side, and technology which is now becoming embedded in real estate. It was not the case just 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, MIPIM launched a new initiative that was called MIPIM PropTech. Okay. And there was this acronym, PropTech, meaning property technology. We were among the very first to use it. Actually, one of our partners even registered the name for the US around 10 years ago. It was new. When you were talking about real estate, no one was talking about technology at the time. No one. Today it's almost become mainstream. And some of the mega projects that have been built today really have technology embedded into the project. And again, this is absolutely not the case for assets or projects that were built in the past. And there is a lot of retrofitting needs in some of the existing projects. And this is something that, an area where we see a lot of interactions among or between new players and legacy players on how to use and how to maximize the effects and the impacts of technology to better use, to better build, but also to better use real estate. And if you think about that, in both areas, so community building and technology, there is one element which is key, which is the human using the asset. And this is something that is quite new. When MIPIM was created, it was only about investment until 10, 15 years ago. And today, it's always about investment, but it's also about the final user. This was kind of the revolution that happened around 10 years ago, fueled by the technology, fueled by also by some of the technology companies that were coming with a consumer approach to real estate, putting the final user at the center and not basically the financing at the center, of the construction at the center, or the technology itself at the center. And this is something that continues, and I see a lot of interactions between, again, the legacy players and the new projects that have already incorporated that element into their thinking and into their planning.
Yeah. I mean, you must have some amazing success stories that come out from collaborations and connections and meetings that happen at MIPIM. I imagine that you hear them every year when people come back and they share that they met somebody or they had a conversation which sparked an idea or changed their opinion about something, and perhaps those are recognized in the awards. But does anything spring to mind in terms of something that really has struck you over the years that where you've been there, that's a real testament to the success of these collaborations?
Well, we have, there are a lot of anecdotes. And I think most of them were built by the serendipity part, I would say. Yeah. I mean, you have a planning and the plan and the organized part, which is important to have in events like that, but then you have a serendipity component that you need to keep. So a component that you don't control in advance. And I have examples of assets that transaction happened months later, or architects that started at MIPIM out of the blue because they met the right person at the right time. Yeah. So the last one is an asset that is one of the iconic assets in Paris. It changed hands at MIPIM, and the seller and the buyer didn't know before, and they just had a coffee, and then they decided a few months later to do this transaction that transformed the asset, and it's in one of the main avenues in Paris. So we have a lot of anecdotes like that, which goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, which is that events like this as well, they have a human component which is absolutely fundamental and at the core of the event itself.
It leaves space for those magic moments, doesn't it? I think, like you say, we can plan all we like, but one of the things with virtual events is I think they took away those chance encounters, those bump into moments, those walk down the corridor and get a coffee moments, because everything felt much more regimented. But you've talked a little bit, I know, in the past about that balance between collaboration but also healthy competition. Because sometimes when you bring together a room full or a town full of people within the same industry, there can be obviously competitors. But how do you find that balance between collaborating but also creating a sense of healthy competition?
Well, you have that. I mean, I think events like the one in Cannes, they can be considered like a huge benchmarking exercise. This is also a way of using them. You really know what's going on in other parts of the world. You cannot hide. You need to play. And you need to go when you're prepared, when you're ready. If you go too early, it's too early. And I think you need to find the right timing to come. To go and to present what you do, and you also need to find to be open to actually change. And we know several projects, even the mega projects, that have changed a little bit or adapted after having been exposed to what was going on in places like MIPIM. It's not the only place, of course. You can have that exposure elsewhere. I'm talking about this healthy competition. I say healthy because it's really comparing to what others are doing, getting the best ideas, knowing who is actually providing good advice and that can actually help you to go further. And be open to experiment and to see what others are doing and then change course and adapt.
Yeah.
So this is typically, again, talking about the awards, this is probably the ultimate example of healthy competition. You go there and you need to accept that maybe on some components your project is not the best yet and you will try again. But it's important that you get what's best around, and this is our mission is, and this is absolutely embedded in what we do, is to make sure that we have the best projects, we have the best companies, we have the best professionals, so that there is a healthy competition and everybody basically gets a little bit better when they go home.
I love that we're talking about some of these softer, more human attributes and skills, because it's really easy to focus on the tangible tools, on the new technologies, on the new materials, on our targets. But actually, what you're talking about, like you say, is openness to change, agility, flexibility, curiosity. And I think that if we all demonstrate a little bit more of that, then collaborative opportunities come up and therefore prompt other opportunities. So is that something you do very overtly internally within your organization? Do you build a culture of collaboration even within the team, within your global partners? How do you do that? Because it's one of the hardest things, I think, to encourage people to want to be open to outside influence.
Well, one of the key components of that, and we try to do that in events as well, is to be as much as we can, similar to the companies or the communities we try to serve. And that's why we put a lot of attention to diversity and inclusion topics within our teams and also within our events.
Yeah.
So we've been working quite a lot on events like MIPIM, but we have other mega events where we do the same to make sure that we are as much inclusive compared to the communities and the industries that we serve. We don't, so that there is a natural communication and natural bridges that are created between the teams, our internal teams, and the communities and the industries.
Yeah.
And we also want to make sure that everybody feels at home at our event, so that when we say inclusive, it's not just a buzzword that everybody uses today. It really means that that's very important for the hospitality industry. We are basically part of that, so that when you go to an event, you feel part of that community, and you can see that people like you, it's not necessarily mandatory to be like everybody else. You can be yourself, and there are other people being yourself, similar to you, at the event. So this is something we believe in very strongly, and is one of the components that explains the success of our mega events. It's not.
I was struck. It's even stated very overtly on your websites. This sort of, is it now be you? Is that the phrase you use?
Absolutely,
you talk about people coming, but now be you. Bring yourself. Bring everything that makes you the unique human you are.
Exactly. I mean, when you go to events like that, you don't need to put a mask. You don't need to put something to be someone else. You're just yourself, and this is very, very important and very key for global events. And this is something we are really attached to, and I'm personally, definitely I am, so that everybody feels at home. This is what I was telling you. An event like MIPIM is truly global because everybody feels welcome, or should feel that way. Yes. This is our hope.
And it's a wonderful thing to create. So as we come to the sort of conclusion of this really fascinating, insightful discussion, I know that MIPIM has as part of its purpose and its mission to influence and accelerate the transformation of the built environment. Now, our session today has been about how we collaborate across borders, how we look internationally to catalyze growth and innovation. But I love that phrase about the transformation of the built environment, because I would hazard a guess that's why we are all in this room today. So is there something you can share with us in closing from how you're outworking that mission, you're catalyzing growth, you're transforming the built environment, that everybody sitting here today might be able to go away and think about or apply or talk to their colleagues about after the conference? What can they do to transform or play their part in transforming the built environment?
Well, we try. I mean, we try to serve the community the best we can, right? Yeah. And we try to put highlight on two aspects. In everything we do at MIP, in everything when we decide how to push for a project, to promote a project, to talk about a project or an initiative, there are two aspects that we always privilege. One is the carbon footprint and the environmental aspects. This is something that was kind of out of the agenda until 10, 15 years ago. We try to play our part. Of course, again, we are just there to emphasize or to catalyze energies that are already there. We are not creating, we are not in the real estate sector, but we wanted to, and we took a strong position already 5, 6 years ago to really put a lot of effort and accent on that. And this is one of the areas, for instance, where we judge and value the projects that are presented at the awards. This is an area where we put a lot of attention and focus on our communication and on our conference program. And this was not something usual or even understood by some of the industry when we started doing that. And the second one is, and I mentioned that a little bit before, is the human component.
Yeah.
And we put a lot of effort to help real estate professionals to think about the final user of the projects.
Yeah.
How will they interact among each other? How will they live in their communities? How to create communities? How the electronic or the digital part can actually help in fostering that community, in creating that. Are we building safe places? Are we building places where people want to live, where people want to grow their kids and so on? And we ask very often these questions to our clients, to our customers, when we assess or we want to understand more about a project, and we invite the professionals coming at our events to put these aspects, these elements in the front line as the highlights of the projects, even before sometimes about the pure financials, which are absolutely fundamental.
Critical,
but it's not the only thing a project is about. So this is what we encourage the industry to think about, and that's why the combination of public and private is also very important, because very often the public side, the government side, has these elements very present, and that's why the mix conversation between the public and private can help in advancing this agenda about the ecological transformation, the ecological transition, and putting the human at the center of what the industry does.
Filippo, so much insight there, such a brilliant international perspective, looking at going beyond our markets, our own specific part of the sector. Thank you for encouraging us to be more human, more open, more curious, to think about the purpose within which we're doing everything. Really do appreciate that. I hope that you've all felt inspired, you've got some things to take away, and perhaps push yourselves beyond your natural comfort zones when it comes to creating even better relationships, networks, and collaborations for the future to catalyze growth and truly play our part in transforming this amazing industry. Will you please join me in thanking Mr. Filippo Rean for his extraordinary insights. Thank you, Filippo.
Thank you. Thank you.